Hello, my name is David Jones. I'm the Managing Director for Robert Half across Asia Pacific. I'd like to welcome you to our CFO Master Series. Throughout this series, we've been able to gain unprecedented access to some of the most influential CFOs across the region. The series will help to uncover what these people's main leadership qualities are, how they got to where they are in their careers, and what keeps them driving forward. I hope you enjoy the CFO Master Series.
Karl Davis, welcome to the CFO Master Series. Karl, you are the Vice President of Finance Retail Information Services for Avery Dennison, a major manufacturer and distributor of office and paper products. What initially attracted you to a career in finance?
Finance allows you to touch all facets of the business, and as a result of that becomes critical to all forms of decision making which you can influence. And having spent from the age of 14 upwards in bars, shops and on building sites, I realised there were better things in life, and finance was one of the vehicles I got into, hence I'm here now.
Karl, you have worked all over the world. In terms of your career, what is the draw for you in Asia and Hong Kong specifically?
I think Asia, when I look back 10 years ago, when people said you go to Asia, you don't come out of Asia because it's a developing economy, and it was the reality you couldn't get back into more developed based economies. I think taking my experience, having worked in those developed economies, brought them to Asia, which now is a major growth sector of the world in terms of how the world is working. The US multinational, European multinational companies are looking to come here. I'm leveraging off my own strengths to help improve the performance of Asian businesses.
How does your experience in the UK compare with your experience in the Asia Pacific?
I don't think you actually compare the UK to Asia. I mean, for once you're comparing one country to many countries. But I think there are traits that you can compare to that. For example, my first assignment when I came out in about '97 was to Korea. And working with the Korea, I realised the value and the work ethic was very much the same. Very hard-working people want to do well just for their own personal sense of dignity and respect. They're also very commercially focused, which is always helpful. I suppose the biggest challenge there for me was the kimchi, first of all, but I've got over that one now. When I look at Japan, which was really my next assignment, where I was the regional manager there, and within that, the challenge of Japan is not Asia, Japan is Japan as I look at it. It's fundamentally different the way it thinks, what have you. But there are traits associated with Germany, for example, in terms of the process-driven thought processes, which I correlate that to, not the UK so much, but to the German market. And then when you're looking at China, etc., within that, which is a very family-orientated type structure, especially if you're dealing with more localized Chinese businesses, there's an element of empathy there, being Welsh myself and my background, which I can relate to in terms of how those businesses work.
Did you find the work culture very different?
Yeah, fundamentally different. Japan particularly, especially the hierarchy, very presidential, etc., driving that through. And I think that's strange decision making when you do it, especially when you look at the people who can make decisions. In Japan, to me, at the time I was 34 years of age, it was foreign to me where I wasn't allowed to make a decision, where in the UK, clearly as a 34-year-old, you can. But there we went through the hierarchy of the organisation before you could effectively make those decisions.
How do you keep on top of industry developments?
Attending seminars, reading. I'd read the papers regularly when I can. Not that you get to do it every day these days, but also through the internet and other methods through that. But also I like attending seminars like the executive boards, the presentations from KPMG, PwC, all the other events. Getting that literature through is very, very important to me. It's real time and it helps me keep abreast of matters.
What is the biggest career challenge you have faced to date, and how did you overcome it?
I think there have been many career challenges, Andrew, through my time. It could be a value and ethics, it can have been fraud, etc. I worked for some notable companies and some notorious companies as well. However, I think my biggest personal challenge was when I went into Japan, as I mentioned earlier, as a 34-year-old, and going through that, and within the first 3 weeks I had to remove the president. And that was very strange for when two cultures came together. And that was a very broad experience that I got, which delved down into many facets of the business, even down to corruption, down to the lowest level of an organisation.
What motivates you in your current role?
Growth, for starters. Being here, as I've mentioned, and in this market, it's a major growth market. The challenge within that, the people that I work with. The company, Avery Dennison, is very non-political as an organisation, which is a pleasure to say. Within that, it really thinks globally, acts globally in terms of its approach, given its major customer bases in the US and the European markets. However, notwithstanding that, I think it's I've got a terrific thought partner and leader in Michael Johansson in my organisation here, and he's an inspiration towards that. And I think if you work with inspiring people, all the way up from him to people like Sean Neville, then it really acts as an enabler for someone like myself.
How did you find your work ethics, and how do you apply them to your role today?
Well, one of the things we brought in was the 4 principles of finance, or the 4 pillars of finance rather. Those 4 pillars relate to business partnership, controllership, transformation, and what I call world-class leadership. And within those, I believe in business partnership. For example, good principles never change, but policies do. And within that, as an organisation goes from localisation to globalisation to drive synergies and decision making through that by standardising that is very, very important. I think on the controllership, there can be no compromise on controllership or compliance within that, with any organisation. And bringing that to bear throughout an organisation with values and ethics, etc., is very important. Thirdly, in terms of transformation, always seeking continuous improvement, whether you're using Enterprise Lean Sigma or Six Sigma, as some companies call it, through their organisation, through to standardisation of processes and procedures, to basically simplify the business, to take waste out is very, very important. And then world-class leadership. I think at the end of the day, we're all in the people business. You're in the people business. I'm in the people business. The business is about people, people, people. And unless you've got those people working for you, then you will never succeed. So it's about getting those people working for you to do that, and getting those values and principles driven down through your organisation at all levels.
Do you have a mentor?
I've had many mentors through my time. I don't think you can ever stick with one. I'll always say my dad's has always been a mentor for me, a man with no education, but was very, very successful in his career. However, throughout my career path, I've had a number of mentors, each seeking different value streams to help me through maybe a chosen situation, what have you. And to me, it's critical to be successful in any part of the business. And that can even go to being an executive coach or whatever it is in any organisation. My advice is reach out for that to any person who genuinely needs that.
What is the most important advice you have received in your career?
Very good question. Probably 2, if you don't mind. I'll take 2. In my very informative years when I was at Kodak, there was a lady called Joyce Bateman who worked in the accounts payable department. And I always made a point of, every time I walk in the office, saying good morning to people. You know, it's like when you get on the train, everyone's head down and no one says hello, no one acknowledges people around them. I think you've got to express and acknowledge people all around you in all aspects of the organisation. It doesn't matter whether you're down at the bottom and the top. And I was sitting on her desk one day, and a guy called Ron Sweetman walked in and just walked straight by. And she said, "Carl, do you know that man used to do your job, he used to do exactly what you're doing, and now he can't even have the time of day to say good morning to me." I took that as a message then, and I've taken that, and I always make a point of acknowledging that, sitting down, talking to people at all levels of the organisation. The second one was a gentleman called Lawrence Chung, who was the MD for China at Tyco at the time. And his advice to me was, "Carl, it's an amazing amount of knowledge you know, but it's not a question of what you know, it's how you apply it, and then how that leads to then more effective decisions." And I suppose those are the 2 critical paths in my career which have always stood by me in terms of how I've approached things.
How do you encourage work-life balance amongst your team?
Well, I suppose getting your own house in order first. My wife probably says, and definitely my children definitely say I don't put enough time and effort into it, and they're probably quite right. I think we all the captains of industry probably have the same criticism laid at them from their wife, their governor at home, and family. So what I try to do is I do try to get the people to enforce their holidays when they can. But also from a social side of it, I play 5-a-side football with some of the lads when I'm in town. I'm not on a plane somewhere. doing things, having a kicking about, and these can be guys from the warehouse, these guys can be from the finance team, all over the shop. And building that level of social awareness within the company is equally as important. So there's a couple of examples, probably not the best.
Tell me how you manage your family time with the demands of work.
I suppose the answer to that question really comes down to making sure that when the daughters require you to be at home, to try to be there to work on assignment, you've got to try and be there. Now, that it can be either over the phone, talking with them, or it can obviously better to be there in person. It's increasingly difficult, I accept that, it's not easy, but you have to force the discipline into yourself to make it happen. I definitely say Friday nights are my nights, they're not the company's nights, and that is where I put the time in at the home with the family if, where necessary. But if there's other forced occasions, make sure you're there for the critical events, whether it's the parents' evening or whatever type of event.
How important is networking to finance professionals, and what advice do you have for people seeking opportunities?
Networking is probably the weakest thing that I had in my resume from my early days through, and I had to force myself into the discipline of networking, going to events, going to presentations, making sure that you did network through those, even to a point of working in, when I worked in private equity for a time, making sure that you sat and took the time to speak to people from different industries and understand what was going on within those industries. To me, to get a broader perspective around that is very, very important. But I think I would recommend to any individual they must do that. In terms of the second part of your question, I suppose the answer to that really would come down to, generally, as I mentioned earlier, it's people, people, people. It's about communicating. And most finance guys, probably as they go through, don't have the luxury of communicating. There's not an excuse that you shouldn't do that in your everyday working life to understand more about the business. You need to understand who the key stakeholders are. You need to understand who those key decision makers are within the stakeholders' teams as well. So being organisational savvy is very, very important for your early career path development. Being aware of the business and what the nature of a business is and what the nature of the economic market, the macroeconomic environment, again, is critically important for any young finance person coming through. So if you can, pick up a paper, read it, and learn from it. It's there in your everyday phase. I think the third one probably from a lower down is make sure that you think outside the box where you have to. Being able to go back with solutions to problems to your boss is probably one of the most critical things to get yourself noticed. Your boss never has got problems in all his life, or challenges as I call them. But it's best if you're going to be a junior working through, go with a solution. Your solution might not be right, but as long as you're giving alternatives, then you'll be deemed to be value added to that organisation in a very short space of time.
Karl, thank you for being a part of the CFO Master Series.
Pleasure, Andrew. Thank you very much.